Often I'm trying to fix what I don't like. I'm resisting what is here in this moment. And I'm doing it from a position of powerlessness. I feel vulnerable, or I feel like I don't have the resources to actually do anything with what's happening right now. And it's from that state of being that I'm actually trying to make a difference and transform something that I don't like in my life. So it makes complete sense, right? That really the way I'm trying to fix whatever's going on is probably not going to be that successful. And if we're talking about it in terms of separation of our inner state, if I'm separate from my wholeness, my completeness, my feeling of self completion, my feeling of, my true state, my essential nature, whatever it is you want to call it, that sense of presence in my life. If I'm separate from that and I'm trying to create a new solution or fix something, then I'm creating from a state of separation, which means the results I'm going to get are going to be founded on that same nature of separation. Whatever I create is not going to be adding to wholeness, it's going to be creating more of what I'm actually trying to avoid. Let me describe that to you a little bit deeply. So, the way I see it, and this is just from my experience, the way I see it is that I learned as a child a lot of ways to get my emotional needs met that actually meant I was walking away from myself. So rather than staying with myself and feeling the love and contentment and wholeness that actually exists within me and allowing the natural flow of life to emerge through me, as a child, I felt uncomfortable. And probably my sense of survival would have been really activated by certain behaviors of my parents. So I learned strategies to deal with that feeling. I learned to people please. I learned to make sure that everybody was okay. I took responsibility for keeping the peace. I took responsibility for other people's feelings. And every time I did that, I was actually sort of forgetting about me and not paying attention to the way I felt and not paying attention to how the needs that I had, running these strategies, expecting that by running the strategies, the feelings I had inside would be fixed by the people I was running the strategies with. And of course, that really doesn't work long term. It often doesn't even work short term, and especially doesn't work when we become adults. So I started to see how every time something happened in my life that activated me, and I like to use the word activated rather than triggered because I think it's such much more welcoming word, right? I'm actually okay with looking at what's going on. Triggered holds such negative connotations. But if every time I am activated by an event or a person in my life, and I immediately look outwards to resolve the feeling that I have and fix my situation, I'm not acting from a state of wholeness. I'm not acting from presence. So the quality of life or energy or whatever you want to call it, the quality that I put into my next actions is undermined by any fear or trying to control that I may be experiencing. That's why I say the problems that we see are actually worsened by the way we're trying to fix those problems. It actually creates more of a problem. However, if I completely flip over that way of being in my own world, and this is a big ask because it's the practice, learning the skills of this, but then the practical application of this wisdom in your own life so that you can flip over from having a reaction and trying to resolve it by changing what's going on externally, to having a reaction and taking your sight inwards and returning yourself to a state of presence, a state of wholeness before you take any action. That requires you a certain level of emotional mastery, which is very possible actually when you have the skills. The thing that I see makes it really difficult for people, and it's true. It's my consistent action. We as humans have so much information. I know I read so many books, went to so many workshops. I had so much information in my head. I knew exactly how to do things. I knew why I did what I did. But I still couldn't change certain unconscious patterns from repeating. I hadn't taken that wisdom and actually brought it down into my heart and embodied what I know about myself to be true so that I can live differently, live from a different state of being. So I knew about being a people pleaser, and I constantly was living out being a people pleaser until I moved into my heart and I realized actually I never was a people pleaser. It was a strategy to meet an emotional need. So if I addressed that first, stayed in my state of emotional presence, I didn't need to run the behavior to resolve what I was feeling. And often the problems would sort of fix themselves pretty quickly. So it does require an awareness that we start to develop. And this was my process anyway. I started to develop this awareness. I then started to go through a different process when I was activated and I was reactive. And it was a very specific process of investigation that allowed me to discover my emotional need and meet that need to bring myself back into a state of wholeness. And then it requires consistent effort. Now, I don't know about you, but as a mum and a wife, I found it pretty challenging to put myself first. I found it pretty challenging to keep putting time and space towards myself when there were other people requiring things of me. And sometimes in life, that's just what happens, right? And even with the best of intentions, you might end up a low priority. So, what I'm suggesting is let's look at it differently. Let's use what's happening to actually build our sense of value. So, while we may be helping our children and being there for our family, we haven't abandoned ourselves in the process. We remain emotionally present. So I am prioritizing myself all of the time, even though I'm doing things for others. It's a very subtle shift, but I tell you what, it makes all the difference to how you show up. If I live like this, I don't create resentment. I don't feel overwhelmed. And so there's no, like those times when you react and you might yell at your kids or you might behave in a way that you're not proud of, and then you have to apologize. And I've seen that quite a lot. There's a lot more awareness around parenting now. So parents will maybe go off their head these days, and then they'll circle back and they'll apologize to their kids, which is great. But what would be better would be that you never got to the state where you actually create that dynamic between you and your kids. That your kids always felt emotionally safe because you had the capacity to actually take charge of your emotional world 24/7. And you're not blowing up to the point where you are out of control and they end up being the recipients of whatever it is you're feeling at the time. I know in past relationships when people have apologized to me but kept repeating the actions, what that made me feel was that I couldn't trust them. It made me feel like I wasn't safe. And it really made me question their honesty and their determination to really keep loving me and holding me in a space that it was connected, because they didn't do the next thing that actually meant they weren't going to keep repeating the behavior. So, this is very much about the awareness, the investigation, and the consistent effort, holding myself accountable all the time. Like, emotional self governance seems a little bit deterring at first, but it is the thing that makes you feel so empowered in your own life. When you can use your emotional energy to create and consciously creating relationships that are deeply connected and emotionally intimate, that is such a better feeling. Like, why wouldn't you put that time in? Why wouldn't you put that conscious awareness into changing behaviors and circuit breaking behaviors? It really isn't as hard as what our mind tells us it is. I think it seems tricky because we don't know an alternative, and that's actually what I teach people is this is how it looks. This is the alternative to people pleasing. It's self-valuing. It's showing up in a state of being that is self-loving and self-valuing, even though I'm doing for other people. It's not abandoning myself in the process. And that requires different skills, different communication capacity, different ways of thinking, but it's very possible. So I'm going to invite you to start that journey. And really, it starts with willingness and earnestness. One of my teachers is Nisargadatta Mirage. He wrote a book called I Am That. And he often talks about earnestness as being one of the greatest qualities a human being could have. It's their capacity to keep coming back to their own presence, to their own natural state, to keep removing what's in the way, to keep expanding this version of life that you're having, not being distracted or at least distracted for too long, but really earnestly looking to return home to the state of emotional presence that is available to all of us. And it truly is power that we can use to create fabulous relationships and a fulfilling life that seems easy. Imagine that. I don't know about you, but my default way of thinking was it's going to be hard. Like, everything looked hard, everything was a problem. Like, I woke up in the morning with this state of despondence, and my default thinking was to expect, that I'd have to work today, like work hard at whatever happened. It's actually just as easy to think everything's going to be easy. It's going to be easy. Everything's easy. Imagine that. It's like a flip of the way I think. And it does create a feeling, and notice it in your body, like it's easy. Things are easy for me, like it's an expansion. Whereas the opposite is a contraction. So even paying attention to that in your body makes a huge difference. So I'm going to invite you to be more you than ever, to really engage with your natural state so you can feel more easy in your life. And if you'd like to work with me or do one of my programs, you'll see a link below. Otherwise, subscribe and just tune in and consider what the options are for the way you're living your life right now, and the alternatives for your relationships. Because truly, you have this capacity right now to create relationships that can massively impact the people and communities around you. And that is truly what the world needs. Sending you love.